Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. On this channel, we talk about problems people face in their day-to-day lives. Let's start with a video.
So I, 32, female, met my fiancé, 33, during post-grad school. We are set to get married within the next 2 months, and I cannot be more excited. So far, everything from the planning of the wedding preparations have been going amazing until it came to making the guest list. So you see, my husband and I wanted a completely stress-free wedding. Although our guest list was long, we did not want any kids there. So we decided on a child-free wedding. We have also held a reception 2 days from our wedding where kids would be allowed. This arrangement was partly due to the fact that there would not be a lot of kids at our wedding to begin with except my cousin's children and my sister-in-law's. Female 28, kids 8, male, and 10 male, respectively. My sister-in-law's kids are extremely loud, entitled, and bratty. I can handle kids, but my nephews are the kind that you would read stories about on Reddit. They are loud, whiny, and spoiled rotten by their parents, grandparents, and basically every adult around them. This is due to the fact that they are the first grandchildren from my husband's side of the family, and as they come from a wealthy family, things just get handed down to them. This was the same for sister-in-law. Being the youngest in the house, she has always had a good life. It's almost like she has it all handed down to her by her parents, whether that be her dream wedding, dream cars, clothes, or anything you can name. Her attitude destroyed her marriage within the span of 2 years, but she did not change because, according to my mother-in-law, how could it possibly be her fault? She could clearly do nothing wrong. Sister-in-law is not only adored by mother-in-law, but also by my fiancé. So when I came into the picture and she wasn't his center of attention anymore, she started seeing me as a sort of competition to her. She would constantly try to sabotage my relationship, not only with her brother, but also my in-laws. She would make snide remarks comparing me to my then boyfriend's exes and telling me how much better he could do than me. This was all done when there was no one around, so I had no way of calling her out of telling my soon-to-be husband about it because I know that he would believe my sister-in-law over me any day. So when we decided on a child-free wedding, I was quite surprised that my soon-to-be husband had agreed on it. We sent out the wedding invite, stating clearly that there were no kids allowed at the wedding. We knew sister-in-law had a few friends of her own that she wanted to invite at the wedding too, for which we decided to send her additional 2 invites so that she could bring in whoever she wished to. After the invites got sent out, I continued planning for the wedding while waiting for the RSVPs. But what I got was an extremely angry call from my sister-in-law. As soon as I picked up, she started going off asking me how I could dare to keep a child-free wedding, considering she claimed that she knew this was my doing to show her that I had gotten my brother wrapped around my finger, and how there was no way she was ever going to comply with this, as her brother would never let a wedding happen without his precious nephews. She said she was going to call my fiancé so that he could put me in my place. I hung up the call and called my husband to let him know about what his sister had just said to me. I was on the verge of tears. I could not take it anymore from his sister, and I think he understood that as soon as he picked up the call. I explained him the situation through my tears, and he told me to calm down, telling me that he would talk to my sister-in-law. After talking to my husband, I tried to calm myself down when I got a call from my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law sounded cold and stern while speaking. She told me she felt disappointed that I was trying to keep her grandchildren away from seeing their uncle get married. I told them that this decision was taken by me and uncle of her grandchildren together so she could blame him as much as me. This seemed to have shut her up as she threw a few more reasons as to why this was wrong before awkwardly hanging up. I wouldn't have been bothered if it was just my sister-in-law, but the fact that my mother-in-law called me surprised me. This was the first time my mother-in-law had talked to me in this tone. Even though I agree my mother-in-law enables my sister-in-law, I think she is overall a fine person to be around, which is why I feel so conflicted. AITA for holding a child-free wedding and technically having my nephews miss their uncle's wedding? Hi all. I did not think I would be updating this, especially after so long, but here I am. Before starting off, I would like to thank you all for your amazing support and advice. I had set passwords with all the vendors that I had purchased from for the wedding, checked in the venue and everything in between. I feel like a lot would have happened if I did not tell the wedding vendors about my sister-in-law, because I was informed by the bakery that someone had called to cancel the wedding cake. Although I instantly figured that it was my sister-in-law, I asked them for the number, and guess what? It was her. Smartly enough, she had called through a friend's number, which I had because she was one of the guests on our wedding list. I guess sister-in-law wasn't that smart after all. I did not tell my fiancé about this, as he was already going through a very rough time accepting everything that went down between him, my mother-in-law, sister-in-law, and when they found out about the Childfree wedding. They had a huge argument where sister-in-law accused my husband of being wrapped around my finger. Although she would say this to me all throughout my relationship, this was the first time that she had said it to my husband. This quickly set my husband off because even though he loved his sister, he wasn't one to accept anyone's BS, especially when he hadn't done anything wrong. Ever since then, my husband had been sensitive about the topic of my sister-in-law and mother-in-law. Now on to the wedding day. I had kept one of my bridesmaids to keep an eye on my sister-in-law, as I knew she was going to pull something during the wedding. Things before the wedding were going perfectly normal. All the expected guests were arriving, everyone was talking to each other, and things seemed as normal as they could for a wedding with 200 guests expected. My sister-in-law had joined us earlier, like the other immediate family, so I figured my fiancé's words were enough to put her into her place. But no! Her shenanigans were only about to begin. As the time of the wedding arrived, I sent my bridesmaid to take a look outside and to check if everything was okay. When she came back, she had a very nervous look on her face. She informed me that she saw my sister-in-law re-enter the venue with about 14 people and her 2 kids with her. I was in an instant panic. The wedding was set to start in about 3 minutes. And I knew there was no way I would be able to explain my husband's situation or do anything at all. Even before I could think of anything, I was called out so that I could start walking down the aisle. I thought to myself, this was it. I would have to go through my wedding with the only thing I wished I didn't have to see: 2 loud kids who would probably disturb the peace. I didn't even mind the extra guests as much as I did the kids, although I did feel sad that I would have to look back at the wedding and know that there were people who I did not want. I went outside and was waiting for the wedding procession to start as I saw my husband along with his groomsmen asking my sister-in-law and her friends to walk out of the wedding. This put me in extreme shock, as I did not think my husband would make a scene in public, but honestly, I was glad he did. My side of the family seemed a little confused as my husband's side of the family tried siding with sister-in-law, but my husband was having none of it. He informed everyone that they could leave with my sister-in-law if they could not agree to what the bride and groom wanted for the wedding. The entire church fell quiet as my sister-in-law, nephews, and the guests quietly shuffled out of the room. Mother-in-law stayed quiet throughout the wedding. I figured she realized sister-in-law cannot be freed out of every mess she gets herself into. Although a little awkward, the wedding went smoothly after that. We had to explain to a lot of the guests what exactly went down, and they understood. Do I feel bad that my sister-in-law ruined my first few wedding moments? Yes. But I'm also glad that my husband stood up for me. It made me feel like I was actually making the right decision to marry him. As for my husband, on our way back from the wedding, he did get pretty emotional. I held him as he talked about how upset he was that he could not protect me earlier. I was also upset to know that the sister he thought would be happy for him and accept me as their own turned their backs on him. I comforted him as we got him and had a good night talking our feelings out and embarking on our new journey of life. She said she was going to call my fiancé so that he could put me in my place. I don't understand where these entitled relatives come from. Who sees their brother's girlfriend as a competition? She seems like an attention seeker who would do anything to get her way. Sister-in-law needs to get a grip on herself and needs to act like an adult instead of a high school teen throwing a fit for not getting her way. Kudos to husband for standing up for OP and not tolerating her BS. NTA. NTA, OP's fiancé and mother-in-law need to stop enabling sister-in-law already. Sister-in-law needs to realize that the world doesn't revolve around her or her children. Her and mother-in-law can just not attend if they have so much of a problem with you. After all, the wedding is a celebration of your love, and it's not what they support. Why be there? After all, the wedding is a celebration of your love, and if that's not what they support, why be there? I hope the wedding goes smoothly for you, OP. So, my wife is in the final stages of pregnancy, and we're expecting our first child almost any day now. Unfortunately, COVID is still a thing, and even though most restrictions have been lifted, there are still some that apply. In the maternity ward, the rule is that you can only have 2-a-day visitors to come and see the baby. Obviously, a bunch of family will be excited to come see, and we need to figure out who will come when. Now, my mother has been driving my wife for a large portion of the pregnancy, so she doesn't have to deal with public transport. The other day in the car, the question of who would come see the baby and when came up. My mom went on one of her long rants about how it's important for her to come see the baby right away because newborns have this look of bewildered amazement, and she had a long and difficult labor with me. Seeing me with the newborn baby moments after birth would complete the circle, and that she would love to see this newborn look. So she basically left my wife in an awkward position where she couldn't really say no. So she just sort of said we'd have a look at what was possible. My wife is from a different country than I am, and her parents are flying all the way from across the Atlantic the week before the baby is due. Obviously, she'd prefer to first see her parents after labor, and I entirely agree that this seems most fair. She's the one doing all the hard work giving birth, and it's her parents that are making the effort of coming all the way here. They will also be the ones that only see their grandchild a few times a year. My parents will be looking after the baby most of the time when we are back at work. So when I heard about this, I got annoyed at my mom and texted her saying she can't just demand to be the first one to come see the child. I explained that it's the hospital's rules and we can't really do anything about it. It seems fairest to me that the parents of the mother get a little priority here, and she'll just have to come the second day. My mom seems to think it is absolutely ridiculous, and she and my wife's mother should clearly be the first to see the baby. I'm guessing this means the grandpas would then both come the next day. Not being able to see my face right after birth would be taking something away from her. Personally, I really don't understand what the big deal is in waiting for day 2 to come see the baby, and I see nothing wrong with going with what my wife wants here. I feel like this is the beginning of the grandparent wars. My mom sees this as my in-laws being selfish and wanting to take day 1 all for themselves. In reality, my wife's parents asked what we wanted and said that they'd be happy with whatever. My mom, on the other hand, never even bothered to ask if we even wanted her to be there. Am I the a-hole here? I would just say, keep the hospital for just you two and have both of your parents meet the baby when you come home. That keeps it fair to everyone. But if your wife wants her parents there, then everyone needs to respect her decision. Also, NTA. NTA, your and your wife's baby, your decision. Hold your ground and don't let the birth of your child be your mom's show. Who gives a snot if you're her baby and she had a hard labor? If you do, it will only be the beginning of her belief that her opinions are more important than anyone else's. At this point, tell her every time she pushes to see the baby, the same day it's born, is an extra day before you'll allow her to see the baby, if that changes her tune. I'm a 23-year-old woman, moved out, my sister is 15 and is still living with our parents. A few days ago, my parents asked me to pick her up from school because she got in trouble and they couldn't. When I got there, I asked the teacher what she did to get in trouble because my sister is a very non-troublesome student, from my knowledge at least. They tell me my sister disrespected them and walked out of class. I asked her if that's true and she says how she's on her period, asked to go to the washroom. The teacher said no. She said it was an emergency. The teacher still said no. His defense was that he was explaining a big project that he wanted her to stay and listen to before going. So my sister basically interrupted and announced that she was on her period and needed to go. This just made the teacher mad because she interrupted and he told her that her period doesn't give her a free pass to leave when she wants. Her response was to argue back, to which he said she'd get detention if she kept doing that. Then she told him to F off and walked out of class. Of course, I laughed at the situation because my sister doesn't get that mad, or does she do something that rebellious? But I was also slightly pissed that this man had the audacity to tell her what he did. So I told him that he kind of asked for that response and that you should let a woman go when she's on her period because it's very messy, uncomfortable, and just annoying if you just make her wait to go. He was very, very stubborn and said something along the lines of how waiting for just a few minutes isn't that hard and how my sister was just being overdramatic. I called him an idiot and said that he, as a man, should not say BS like that when he doesn't really know what it's like. This just turned into him calling me disrespectful and how he'll just talk to our parents. So I just took my sister home, telling he can just complain to them if he wants. My parents think he is in the wrong, but that I shouldn't have insulted him. So AITA? NTA, as a man, he doesn't get to determine when she needs to be allowed to go to the bathroom because of her period. A female teacher would be smart enough to know that if you are leaking through your protection, you need to go immediately or you will have to change clothes, which you may not have. I am a teacher, would and also say F off to that teacher. I have also instructed my daughters to walk out if they are on their periods and teachers refuse to let them go. NTA, if I were you, I'd help your sister to report this incident to the principal. Judging from his conversation with you, he won't be amending his behavior and will keep doing this to future students. Being told to F off isn't enough of a consequence for him to open his eyes and realize he's a moron.